Hi, everyone. Welcome to the session on optimizing the dev lifecycle. My name is Bear Douglas, and I lead the developer relations team at Slack, and I'm going to be the moderator today. Today with me, I have Holly Allen, also from Slack. We have Bob Matsuoka here from Tripadvisor, Patrick Hill from Atlassian, and Leila Mayo from Truist. So quickly, panelists, I would love to hear a little bit about what you do at your respective companies so everyone here at Frontiers knows what we're talking about today. Let's start with you, Holly.
Hi, I'm Holly Allen, the Director of Reliability Engineering. We write the software and run processes that help Slack stay reliable. So that includes monitoring, SRE, incident response, and standard setting around reliability.
Bob, next.
Yep, Bob Matsuoka, Senior Director of Engineering on the Platform and Operations team at Tripadvisor, and I'm also the head of two separate projects, both of which rely heavily on Slack. One is Reco, our direct-to-consumer travel trip designer platform, and the second is CrowdFree, which is a public service app we're in the middle of writing, written almost entirely by volunteers that relies entirely on Slack for all of its communications.
Patrick?
Hey, I'm Patrick Hill, Head of Reliability Process at Atlassian. My team is part of the bigger SRE team. We help Atlassian products remain stable and work for our customers.
And Leila?
Hey guys, I am the Platform Enablement Engineer at Truist with over teammate experience. And so I'm heavily involved in the digital aspect of our area. And then I'm also implemented Slack at Truist.
Awesome. So bringing it back to the topic, we're here today to talk about optimizing the development lifecycle and improving reliability. So it would probably help to start by getting a definition from everyone about what we mean when we say that. Mean time to resolution is one metric that people commonly use to track this, but what else do you all use to measure and report on reliability up to the exec level? Bob, maybe we can start with you.
Sure. I think in our case, there's a couple of different scenarios. There are applications, of course, that are live, and they have a very specific set of metrics around reliability, mean time, and so on. But again, there are also things such as how quickly we are able to respond to changes, to respond to errors, how quickly we resolve problems that come up through the development process. And then also, I think a big part of that is how quickly the issues are surfaced to our developers, our developer managers, and our counterparts in product.
And so do you have instrumentation around measuring those response times?
We do. We have a full set of instrumentation. And I think from my perspective, more than the instrumentation per se is how quickly different teams can actually implement the communication or actually implement the instrumentation itself, as well as how quickly they can communicate the results of the instrumentation to their development teams and their product partners.
Awesome. So we'll talk a little bit in the next question about how you've gone about improving those numbers. Patrick, I'd love to hear if that resonates or if you're using different measurements for success in this case.
Yeah, good question. Some of them are similar. So we do look at those things like time to detect, time to resolve, making sure it gets to the right people at the right time. We just finished our quarterly engineering operations review, and we've started looking at SLO attainment in that space. And we're trying to measure whether customers can actually use our products for the things, the features, the journeys that they're paying for, right? So if you think about Jira, it's a great issue. I think if you looked at Slack, it'd be send message or something similar. We're looking at those measures and seeing if they can actually do that for the period of time that we're looking at. We also have additional signals around things like repeat incidents. You don't want to have repeat incidents, so ideally those go to zero. Customer detected incidents. So if someone tells us there's something wrong with our products, then obviously that's bad. And then we look at other things like I said before, like time to resolve, time to detect, and those kinds of things as well.
Very cool. Leila, what about you and your team?
So we're newer in this space, especially when it comes to Slack, and we've just been trying to streamline the friction. And so time to resolve is just something that we're working in and trying to implement through our channels and just streamlining those response times through the platform.
Great. Holly, do these metrics resonate too, or is there anything else that we use at Slack?
They definitely resonate. I think one thing that we have, which I'm quite happy with, is obviously what matters is our users having a good experience with the product, just like Patrick said. So we say, well, a good experience is when the product behaves quickly, so that's performance, successfully, that's reliability, has the correct behavior, that's quality, and then without exposing data, so that's security. And so what we do is we pack a lot of data points together to create a composite metric that we call service delivery index. And we report on that, and we have sort of goals for the overall metric and for sub portions of it. For the reliability portion of it, we're tracking user downtime and error rates in different levels of the infrastructure. And so what's nice is that this sort of one kind of simple metric lets us pull down the user experience to goals for all the different parts of our infrastructure. And of course, we also measure, just like people said, things like how fast can we get things fixed, how many people were affected, and how much time are we spending on an incident when it happens.
So it sounds like pretty much everyone is looking at a suite of metrics. It's not like there is one North Star figure that you're trying to move. So I would be curious to know what processes you've put in place to drive those metrics, if indeed that is your approach. Are you really trying to move these numbers specifically, or are you looking at them to create a holistic picture of what's going on when you aim to do the right thing organizationally? So what processes have you put in place? Are there any tools or automation that are driving that? And are those in service of the number, or is it really that we're trying to do the right thing and the number is changing based on how we think we're measuring our action of the right thing? Maybe we can start with Patrick on that.
Yeah, sure. So we, do look at those things. I guess one thing that we've kind of looked at over the years has been how quickly can a team get from getting an alert or getting, the monitoring system telling something's wrong or customers saying something's wrong into actually working and fixing it. And this is where Slack's actually been really useful for us, because instead of, someone getting an alert, working in isolation, working by themselves, trying to figure out what's going on, they create an incident in Jira, and then with some automation off the back of that, that creates a Slack room where everyone who's involved with that incident automatically gets invited to, and then people start working on that, right? So over the years, we've looked at patterns like that to see where we can automate and help. We also have some other pieces that get spun up on the back of that, right? So we have the Confluence page, which gives people some troubleshooting instructions, general things they should think about. And all of that is trying to reduce, I guess, the amount of cognitive load or wasted time that we spend when trying to triage an incident, like make sure it's actually something that's worthwhile, and then work on a fix.
Totally. So which parts of the process did you feel like were most effective being automated?
The creation of the Slack room and then getting the right people in there, right? So that's always the biggest challenge that we found in the past. Like if I go back 6-7 years, it was always, have I always got the right people in the room? Have I got the right experts? Have I got the right metrics here, right? More often than not, teams usually inside themselves knew what was going on, right? They might have a private chat room where they have their alerts coming through or the metrics coming through, but that doesn't help people who aren't in that chat room, right? You need to have people from customer support involved, right? You need to have people who are working on other services that are in that, constellation of services that might make up that customer experience. If you're not talking, communicating, collaborating, then that's going to lead to longer time to resolve. It's going to cause more pain for your customers, and it's going to make more people churn or be unhappy.
Definitely. So Leila, one of the things that you mentioned that you have done at Truist is architect the Slack rollout. So did you think about some of the ways that you could roll automation and process in Slack to help these types of process?
Yeah, definitely. I think that's where we found the most benefit, is that just within a few hours after we implemented Slack and we're live, our DevOps teams were able to set up integrations, within GitHub and GCD and just version 1. And so that took literally 4 hours for them to set up, and it streamlined all of those processes so they could get those notifications when they're needing pull releases or anything like that, or if they're triaging an issue. They have all of those 4 platforms into one, and the value that has provided and streamlined for us. They're working on bots as well to notify them personally, has just been amazing. And it really only took them just a few hours to get started.
And that's fantastic to hear. Holly, one of the things that you had brought up in the past is that getting these things actually resolved and getting participation from other teams is a really cross-functional effort, and it involves getting buy-in from across the company. So there's some part of it that is about automation and tooling, and some part of it that is about socializing the process. Can you tell us a little bit about what's worked at Slack?
Yeah, so Slack, made its move into improving our incident process a couple of years ago. And one of the nice things that we did is we created this service that collects all the information about what teams own what parts of the system. And that let us make bots that let you escalate to the right teams as fast as possible based on not only like the name of the service, but also like what is the symptom that users are seeing, for example. And it might let you create a JIRA ticket if it's sort of a low severity problem, or all the way up to creating an incident if something really major is happening. And so automating both the finding of who owns this thing and putting in some, baking in some of that, like how do we think about severity and how do we think about escalation into the automation so that it takes a little bit of load off of, say, a customer experience person who's trying to make that decision. And then the other really important thing, of course, on top of making a Slack channel for every incident and those sorts of nice things, is have the automation that really just lifts the load. So if you've got a status report on the incident that's going in every 20 minutes, like make that as easy as possible with automation for the incident commander, or pull relevant information out of the channel for whoever's going to do that incident review to make that easy as possible so they can just think about the things that only a human can know. So those are some of the great things that we've done. And then finally, like collect as much data and metadata as possible about what happened, how fast did people find various things, how fast was it mitigated for the users, all of that. Make sure that it's in JIRA, make sure that it's in your own database, make sure it makes the data warehouse. Like you need to cross-correlate that data with as many different things as possible.
Sounds like a lot of work in addition to a big payoff. Bob, what has worked well at Tripadvisor when it comes to things that are getting automated versus things that are really people-based changes to coordinate?
Well, I think at Tripadvisor, we're still in the process of getting the automation down. We have a number of processes for sort of immediate response. Obviously, we have more traditional processes. I think we are in the process of getting finding the mean. 100%, the patterns of behavior have changed. We do create Slack channels. Again, I wish they were always automated because really, at the end of the day, any group communication at this point needs a backup Slack channel, and we're getting there on our own. I think we'll be at the point where you have to do it automatically at some point. For CrowdFee, as another example, this is a project entirely run by volunteers. We have no permanent staff. So the expectation here is that everything that we have to do in terms of response to issues or customer support or so on, we'll go through Slack, we'll automate it, and then we'll deliver it out to the various people that need to address it. Because again, it's not going to be a fixed staff. They'll have to really be responding to Slack issues or incidents as they occur. So again, I think part of that is this notion that I'd say not so much cognitive overload for us, it's communication overload. I just actually cleared out my Outlook. I had 100,000 or so emails in about a week, I think that was. And then almost all those are the traditional automation emails. So clearly, if you're at the point where you're clearing out tens of thousands of emails, there's nothing effective about that. So I think the key is how do you communicate the right message to the right level of person within the company, right? The customer is going to see one level of support. They'll understand what's going on. The engineer responsible for resolving it, they're going to have their immediate workflow. But in between that and that, there's a whole series of communications that have to escalate and flow up. And all of that really should be handled in a place like Slack because once it's done, it's done. There's no persistence, there's no subscription. It's really immediate and responsive. And if you need to know about it, you know about it. And if you don't, it just passes right by.
So in working with a lot of these systems, they sound like you need to do a certain amount of maintenance, for example, on keeping track of what team actually has ownership over a certain system. Things like that do need updates over time. And all of this can feel perhaps to other corners of the engineering org like they are heavy reliability processes. So even though they're important, they are a lot of work to maintain. This is a question that I would love to hear from anybody on. How have you gotten buy-in from different engineering teams to do that maintenance work, to be involved in the process and get the reliability outcome that we're all looking for?
I'll go. So about, 7 years ago, whenever customer support had an issue that got reported by a customer, they used to either go into a room and then do something like @hero @channel, right? And then just get everyone's attention, right? That works when everyone's online and awake. When people aren't, obviously it doesn't work. So what we ended up doing first off was moving them into Jira Service Desk, where people could create tickets, and then those would start getting routed to people. And that started off with, 1 or 2 people. I was one of them, that ended up getting alerted at like 3 a.m. in the morning saying something's broken, right? And then from there, we'd spring into action as incident managers and then go through and work on that. Over time, what we've done is we've sat there, we've trained people, we've then qualified them to say, hey, you can manage incidents, and then certified them to say you are going to manage incidents now. Going back in time, the quickest way to get that mindset shift was waking people up in the middle of the night sometimes, right? You find people very quickly will change their attitudes about what they are or aren't responsible for if you're waking them up in the middle of the night. For example, in my case, I didn't want to be woken up at 2 or 3 a.m. every morning. So I learned pretty quickly that we needed to start figuring out how we could delegate and kind of certify and then empower people and then effectively distribute responsibility over time to them. So we've gone from having 1 or 2 people in the company that are major incident managers to now having around 300 of the thousands of Atlassian staff that we have that can manage a major incident, right? And that works by, unfortunately, sometimes, escalating the situation a bit at the start, and then over time, qualifying them, training them, certifying them, and then making sure that they're actually responsible for it moving forward.
Does that resonate with other folks? Let the teams feel the pain first, and then you get their buy-in a bit more easily?
Yeah.
Yeah, I think in addition to all of the things that Patrick said, you also have to provide some value, right? There isn't, we actually had a false start where we made this software to track who owns what, but there wasn't much value in it for the software development teams. There was a lot of value in it for some of us, but they weren't feeling it. So we needed to add more and more functionality there so that, hey, if you claim the things that you own, you also get all this great information and all these great charts and graphs that are helpful to you to do your job. So just it's the same as any other product. It's an internal product, but you still have to meet the needs of the users so that they'll engage with it and keep that information up to date so that the whole process works.
Out of curiosity, what type of metric were you surfacing that really delivered that value to the software teams?
So what we've been able to do is that service delivery index that I talked about at the beginning. We've been able to break that down and tell which teams are causing problems with that index and show you like, hey, are you actually pulling the index value up? Great. Are you pulling it down? Not so good, right? So they can understand their individual impact on that metric. And that metric is something that is tracked by the execs. And so they know that it represents a useful reflection of what our users are experiencing. And so now they care about it and they can see that information.
How in touch would you say your teams are broadly within engineering with that type of metric, like an SDI? So Holly, it sounds like at Slack, people are pretty aware of how their teams are impacting that type of metric. Maybe Bob, do you have a sense of how different engineering teams at Tripadvisor interact with those numbers?
Yeah, I'd say Tripadvisor, we live and die by our financial metrics. And I think the entire company and the engineering teams know them, less so by our various operational metrics. So I think we should probably do it more often. But I can say that, we were acquired from a startup called City Maps about 4 years ago now. And we were on Slack. And when we moved to Tripadvisor at first, we were on a different IAM platform. And the difference from going to a platform like Slack to something that we were using, and then Tripadvisor adopted it about a year after we were acquired, was night and day. And I think while I can't quote the mean time to resolution, some of the other statistics, I can say that the speed at which engineering and product adopted this, again, behavior is everything. I mean, even the notion of creating channels. Our previous platform, the idea of actually creating a channel for a topic was just not done. It was just too much of a hurdle, too much inertia to do it. But now, of course, it's very, very common, and the number of channels is high. Obviously, it's not all visible to everybody, but it's there. So I think I can also say that you can see that because you were talking before about sort of the payoff. in engineering and product, the payoff's immediate. We see it right away. It affects our behavior, it affects our daily lives. Everybody just wants to solve everything here. Less so in other parts of the business. And I think gradually things legal, HR, they're coming on board, but you can see the payoff is not as quick for them. And that's why they're slow to adopt it. With engineering and product, it's instant.
Leila, out of curiosity, did you see something similar as you brought your company onto Slack and started instituting some of these processes, even like channel creation and getting people to share information in those spaces?
Yeah, definitely. I think so. We're still rolling out. Mainly, we've already rolled out to a few different areas, but they were very eager to adopt to it. We were going through a merger, and so Slack really came at the right time just to help us streamline these processes and then communicate with each other as we formed a new culture and team. So it's really been amazing. I feel like they were very hungry for Slack, and so it wasn't very difficult to get them to adopt it. And they've, kind of just taken it and run with it since then.
So a common theme I heard in some of your earlier answers was about the impact on the end user and whether the end user is still able to do things that they're interested in doing, like top workflows, top experiences of quality, and so on. Patrick, can you tell me a little bit more about how you keep an eye on that in practical terms?
Yeah, definitely. So we've got a couple tools internally that kind of help people organize these measures, right? Like I think you still need to put metrics on things first, and then you can organize them into different buckets and whatnot. But two of the things that we do have is, obviously alerts of these go straight to the Slack rooms for those teams, right? And they configure them. So there's kind of a bit of an onus on the team to take responsibility of those. The second thing that they do in order to make sure people can keep doing it is look at our weekly both team level and then kind of departmental level reports. So we have a thing internally called TechOps, which teams run. It's super awesome. What it does is collect all the stats that you need to care about, right? How many times you were alerted, whether you're actually meeting those customer expectations around reliability and availability and performance. It looks at some other stats, provides you an internal list of tasks that you might need to, look at. So, hey, do you need to apply this patch to your microservice or something like that? And that comes in weekly. And then teams have this then constant cadence of looking at these weekly, making sure they're always improving or staying on track over time. And that really helps in making sure that we're continuously meeting customer expectations, right? Like, I think it's very easy for us to always say, hey, something's broken, let's fix it now. But then you also take a bit of a longer term view, right? You need to go week on week and just go, hey, how are we tracking? And then quarter on quarter, and then go bigger, right? And when you look at those different metrics through those different time lenses, so to speak, you'll find there's different sets of concerns, right? Like you might be fine one week, bad the next week, fine the next week. But then you look at over a quarter and you go, actually, of the 100 million requests that we served, right? Only actually 1,000 customers couldn't do their jobs, right, for that time. So maybe we're actually okay, even though it felt like we were rough, at certain points during the quarter.
Does that resonate with anyone else, or do you have different approaches?
Yeah, we definitely track real user metrics in terms of how fast does the channel sidebar load, for example, or what's the success rate of sending messages. And some of these things have alerts on them because they're so important that if they become too slow or not responsive enough, then it's an incident. So we'll alert on that. We also have the same kinds of reports around any goals that we might have so that we can see if we're getting close to breaking that SLO, even if we haven't yet. And then I think I just want to make a plug for tracing too. Tracing has been game-changing at Slack over the last year in terms of really helping us tie together all the many metrics that lots of different teams put in place. But how can you figure out from the user perspective what is happening and how does it feel? Tracing has really, really made a difference for us in being able to answer those questions really quickly, especially in an incident.
Bob or Leila, anything to add?
Yeah, no, tracing, observability, huge parts of our initiatives this year, especially. I think it's been too difficult. And I think our goal is to sort of integrate a lot of the different efforts we have, put them all together, and then again, service them using something like Slack is exactly the right answer. I think it's got to be quick, it's got to be easy, and it's got to be immediately sort of actionable to the right level of person who gets the notification.
So you said that this is something that you've been working on over the last few months. How have you gone about prioritizing it or thinking about the level of effort and work that has to be done to make it better?
It's a complicated question. We have actually kind of several different environments. We have a legacy environment where we have a lot of our own homegrown systems that work to a certain degree. The problem is really they're not as accessible. So, for example, we've been talking with Datadog about migrating some of our systems to using their integrations. I think things like that we're more and more trying to focus on areas where if it's not strategic, let's look at other options for doing it, more of a holistic approach, and then focus on the areas where we can't obviously use a third-party vendor to provide that service for us.
All right, well, we're coming to the end of the session here. So what I want to do is take time for any parting wisdom that any of you have around processes that have worked really well for your team in Slack, since everyone here at Frontiers today hopefully is either a Slack user or considering how they could make their organization work better in Slack. We'd love to hear any top tips you have. I'll pick on Holly first so that maybe she's got something top of mind, and we'll go from there.
I think bring as much of the instrumentation and alerts as possible into Slack, because being able to tell like, oh, this pull request got deployed at this time, and oh, look, that's when this alert started, and oh, look, that's when this other graph in this other area started to go down. Like being able to correlate that sort of thing really quickly is super powerful. And then you can find the right people even more quickly that way. So just bring it all into Slack, make your dedicated alerts channels and deployment channels and things like that. And it has been huge for just since I joined Slack and see how we do it here, just seeing how productive that can make you. It's totally game changing.
Thanks. Bob?
Yeah, I'll second that. All of our, PRs and system notifications that come to the various channels, that's great. I'd say in addition to that, I think the big sort of mirror the culture, mirror the communications, especially in the remote working COVID times. There's no water cooler, there's no side channel, side desk walking by somebody. So that all happens online, and largely it all happens in Slack. And I think the more you can sort of create the structures that mirror the kinds of communication you're having, the better. I mean, for CrowdFree, our entire culture is really around Slack, because we've actually never, since we started in COVID, we've actually never met in person. So we have about 10 different external partners. We have an internal team of about 12. Lots of different integrations, and really the meeting ground is all inside of Slack, and it's really replaced our office, so to speak, in actually a very literal sense.
That's really impressive that you've managed to create that cohesiveness even post-COVID times. Patrick, any last tips?
Yeah, so Holly called out a big one, which is around transparency of information. Always make sure everyone in your company knows where to go and, kind of where to look for what happened recently, that kind of thing. We've got an outage notifications channel, which does something similar, which so people know what's actually broken right now, and it stops people, looking for further help. On that point, though, once you do need help, make sure everyone knows where to go. We bought a company called Help, which is super useful, but what it does is that if you ask a question, it can then go track it, right? So people can always go and find an answer for it. I highly recommend you look into that. We've got quite a few channels where people know where to go for help, right? Be it a central help desk across the whole company, be it you need SRE help on something specifically, right? We have those channels in Slack, which really helps us make sure people can go and get help in the fastest time possible.
That's a great tip. Yeah, centralized help channels, always easier to discover. Leila, any final tips?
So yeah, I definitely want to echo what everybody else said. I think that, we've seen a lot of value from the integrations. It really helps everybody just kind of stay within the platform. They don't have to jump out to do their different tasks. And then we've done a lot of things with the water cooler aspect as well. I mean, we have a pups channel and different type of channels that we really can connect to from a teammate experience. And then most of all, I'm really impressed. Our leadership is super engaged in Slack. They write back to everybody on the different channels, on innovation. They comment on the random channel. And I really think that fosters, that engagement and keeps everybody plugged in and talking and connected. So they also feel like while they're being productive, they have, that kind of camaraderie.
That's great to hear. So I want to say a big thank you again to all of our panelists for joining today and all of you who are watching here at Frontiers. Thanks so much for coming, and we hope you stick around for some of the other sessions that are happening today at Frontiers. It's been a pleasure. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.